Today is Monday, March 30th, 2026, and this is Read Through the Bible.
Today we are reading from Esther. We're returning from what we read on Friday, and we're going to read 3 chapters today, chapters 3, 4, and 5 of this novella, which is really a short story. And just to catch you up to speed, in chapter 1, we see just that Queen Vashti refused to come to the feast, and so these letters were sent to all just to say, wives, you need to obey your husbands. And then in chapter 2, Esther, the Jewish person, the Jewish woman, was crowned queen.
Mm-hmm. She was chosen as the new queen.
Yeah. And then the subtle thing that you need to remember for later is that Mordecai just reveals this assassination plot against the king.
Right.
Okay. All right. And we're going to try to read this mostly without comment because the story really carries itself. You don't need a lot of explanation, though there is a verse in chapter 4 I'm sure we'll stop at. Okay, chapter 3, verse 1. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, and advanced him and set his throne above all the officials who were with him. And all the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage. Then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, "Why do you transgress the king's command?" And when they spoke to him day after day, and he would not listen to them, they told Haman in order to see whether Mordecai's words would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage to him, Haman was filled with fury. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone. So they had made known to him the people of Mordecai. Haman sought to destroy all the Jews, the people of Mordecai, throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus.
Wow. So just because Mordecai wouldn't bow to Haman, and because he was Jewish, then Haman wanted to kill all the Jews. Like, what an overreaction.
Well, we're going to see how strong he's going to try to evoke a Holocaust upon all the Jews here.
Yeah. Okay, verse 7. In the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pur, that is, they cast lots, before Haman, day after day. And they cast it month after month, till the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, "There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of every other people, and they do not keep the king's laws, so that it is not to the king's profit to tolerate them. If it please the king, let it be decreed that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who have charge of the king's business, that they may put it into the king's treasuries." So the king took a signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, "The money is given to you, the people also, to do with them as it seems good to you."
Then the king's scribes were summoned on the 13th day of the first month, and an edict according to all that Haman commanded was written to the king's satraps and to the governors over all the provinces and to the officials of all the peoples, to every province in its own script, and every people in its own language. It was written in the name of King Ahasuerus, and sealed with the king's signet ring. Letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces, with instruction to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all Jews, young and old, women and children, in one day, on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, to plunder their goods. The 13th day of the 12th month. Well, you laugh because
We have a son who
was born
his
on the
birthday
13th,
was on the 13th day of the 12th month.
I did not realize that until right now.
I didn't either. Though their months are different.
Yes, they are. A copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province by proclamation to all the peoples to be ready for that day. The couriers went out hurriedly by order of the king, and the decree was issued in Susa the citadel, and the king and Haman sat down to drink. But the city of Susa was thrown into confusion.
Wow.
It just didn't make sense that they're going to kill all these Jewish people
Yeah, because Haman was mad that Mordecai wouldn't bow to him.
Yeah, and I'm sure there were other things.
I think
probably
there was deep hatred. I'm sure that he had against the Jews.
Okay, chapter 4.
All right. When Mordecai learned all that had been done, Mordecai tore his clothes and put on sackcloth and ashes, and went out into the midst of the city, and he cried out with a loud and bitter cry. I mean, sure, he realizes his people are threatened because he wouldn't bow down to Haman. Verse 2, he went up to the entrance to the king's gate, for no one was allowed to enter the king's gate clothed in sackcloth. And in every province, wherever the king's command and his decree reached, there was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting and weeping and lamenting, and many of them lay in sackcloth and ashes.
When Esther's young women and her eunuchs came and told her the queen was deeply distressed, she sent garments to clothe Mordecai so that he might take off his sackcloth, but he would not accept them. Then Esther called for Hathach, one of the king's eunuchs, who had been appointed to attend her, and ordered him to go to Mordecai to learn what this was and why it was. And Hathach went out to Mordecai in the open square of the city in front of the king's gate. And Mordecai told him all that had happened to him and the exact sum of money that Haman had promised to pay into the king's treasuries for the destruction of the Jews. Mordecai also gave him a copy of the written decree issued in Susa for their destruction, that he might show it to Esther and explain it to her and command her to go to the king to beg his favor and plead with him on behalf of her people. And Hathach went and told Esther what Mordecai had said. Then Esther spoke to Hathach and commanded him to go to Mordecai and say, all the king's servants and the people of the king's provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king inside the inner court without being called, there is but one law to be put to death, except the one to whom the king holds out the golden scepter so that he might live. But as for me, I have not been called to come into the king these 30 days.
And they told Mordecai what Esther had said. Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this.
And there's the famous phrase, 4:14, for such a time as this. Mm-hmm. And basically, Mordecai is a little bit like the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in Daniel's furnace. They said, we know that God is able to deliver us, but even if he doesn't, we're still going to praise. And here Mordecai says, if you keep silence, God's going to deliver the Jews another time. But you have been the one who have come to just such a time as this. So it's the sovereignty of God. Though God is never mentioned in the book of Esther, here we see just the sovereignty of God.
Right, yeah. Verse 15, then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa and hold a fast on my behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. And I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish. Mordecai then went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him.
Okay. So in chapter 3, this decree was made. In chapter 4, they wept and tried to figure out what to do. And Mordecai urged Esther to go talk with the king. Like, she has been raised up to this spot, and perhaps by God's sovereignty, for sure.
Well, and right there at the end of chapter 4 are a couple of just very often quoted verses.
Yes.
In 14, about who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. And then her resolve in 16, where she says, well, if I perish, I perish.
Yep. Okay, so we see here in chapter 5 her first attempt at trying to tell the king. On the third day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace in front of the king's quarters, while the king was sitting on his royal throne inside the throne room opposite the entrance to the palace. And when the king saw Queen Esther standing in the court, she won favor in his sight, and he held out to Esther the golden scepter which was in his hand. Then Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. And the king said to her, what is it, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given to you, even half of my kingdom. And Esther said, if it please the king, let the king and Haman come today to a feast that I have prepared for the king. Then the king said, bring Haman quickly, so that we may do as Esther has asked. So the king and Haman came to the feast that Esther had prepared. And as they were drinking wine after the feast, the king said to Esther, So what is your wish? It shall be granted to you. And what is your request? Even to half of my kingdom it shall be fulfilled. Then Esther answered, my wish and my request is, if I have found favor in the sight of my king, and if it please the king to grant my wish and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come to the feast that I will prepare for them, and tomorrow I will do as the king has said. So I don't know whether she got wet feet at this moment.
Yeah, I don't know.
But it does allow the story to progress, to allow Haman to do some more evil to the Jews. Yes.
Right. As we're going to read here. Verse 9. And Haman went out that day, joyful and glad of heart. But when Haman saw Mordecai in the king's gate, that he neither rose nor trembled before him, he was filled with wrath against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. He sent and brought his friends and his wife Zeresh. And Haman recounted to them the splendor of his riches, the number of his sons, all the promotions with which the king had honored him, and how he had advanced him above the officials and the servants of the king. Then Haman said, even Queen Esther let no one but me come with the king to the feast she prepared, and tomorrow I am invited by her together with the king. Yet all this is worth nothing to me so long as I see Mordecai the Jew sitting in the king's gate. Then his wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, let gallows 50 cubits high be made, and in the morning tell the king to have Mordecai hanged upon it. Then go joyfully with the king to the feast. This idea pleased Haman, and he had the gallows made.
Yep. So we're leaving it today on a hanger as the story progresses, but we'll pick it up tomorrow. Okay? Bye-bye.
Goodbye.